The Pixel 4a 5G comes from that brief, uncertain chapter in Google's phone history when it seemed like they weren't quite sure what a Pixel should be. It launched alongside the Pixel 5, both leaning into the mid-range hardware, as if Google was quietly stepping away from the flagship race. At the time though, the 4a was easy to recommend, around $400, well received, and building on the goodwill from the 3a. Now, 5 years later, I've been using it again, living with it for a week, seeing how it holds up day to day. Not just the performance or the battery, but the full picture. Is it still usable? Maybe as a backup? Is it actually better than I remember? Or will the battery or the end of software updates be what finally tips it over? It launched at $400 and now you can get it for around $100 on eBay. That price drop alone makes me curious. Does it still feel like the $100 phone or does it carry more weight than that? The first thing I noticed picking it up again is the weight, or the lack of it. It's light, almost airy, and the round plastic frame makes it comfortable in a way phones nowadays rarely manage. The texture is soft under the fingers, and it's held up surprisingly well. The size feels refreshing compared to newer phones. It sits in the hand naturally, never stretching my fingers too far, and it slips into a pocket without that brick-like weight. The front is Gorilla Glass 3, which has aged better than I expected. The button still feels crisp and tactile, and the rear fingerprint sensor, old school capacitive, just feels natural and responsive. My finger rests there without thinking, unlocking instantly. I even use it to slide the notification shade down, which is one of those small conveniences I miss on newer phones. The haptics are still sharp too, not as refined as newer Pixels, but there's that same crisp little buzz when you tap or type, which makes the whole phone feel more alive in the hand. Despite feeling so light, it doesn't feel cheap. The 6.2-inch OLED isn't the sharpest or brightest, but it's enough. Sharp enough that I never see individual pixels, colorful enough to enjoy a movie. After a few years of odd design choices, this one feels more normal. Just a single hole punch in the corner, thin bezels, and that little chin at the bottom that throws off the symmetry. The screen's only 60Hz, so it doesn't have the smoothness of newer phones, but it still plays 4K on YouTube and HDR on Netflix without a problem. Coming from 90 or 120Hz displays, the difference is noticeable. Scrolling feels slower, less fluid, but after a while, my eyes adjusted. It reminded me how normal 60Hz once felt. Outdoors, the brightness definitely struggles. On a sunny day, I had to squint at times. And that's where you feel the limits of this panel compared to what we have now. And then there's the camera. The same Sony IMX363 sensor that made the Pixel name. A 12MP main and 16MP ultra-wide. Producing photos that still look great. Low light, bright sunlight, it doesn't matter. The rich contrast and that unmistakable pixel processing are still here. You do see that preview noise in the viewfinder. And switching lenses still brings a half a second of lag, a reminder of the time it came from. But once the processing kicks in, the results hold up. Even the selfie camera, while not the sharpest, feels balanced, pleasant without overdoing it. We'll dig deeper into the camera later, so you can either keep watching or skip ahead if that's what you are here for. Android 14 is the last stop for this phone. No more updates beyond that. So it sits with the standard sets of features you have probably seen many times before. Those same generic customization options, UI tweaks, all that stuff that came with Android 14. Sometimes the animations are smooth and it behaves exactly like a Pixel should. Other times there's a drag to it, small jitters, frame drops that makes it feel like 30Hz display. Restarting clears it up, but the pattern repeats. And I'm not really sure if that's the problem just with my unit or if it was just like that in the first place. The hardware inside, 6GB of RAM, UFS 2.1 storage, keeps it decently quick for most tasks, especially for a phone that now costs around $100. Social apps, streaming, browsing, they all work without issue. The speakers are better than I expected too, full enough to still surprise me on a device this old. Gaming is possible, but within limits. I tried Delta Force, stayed away from the highest graphics settings, and it ran well enough to play. The Snapdragon 765G and Adreno 620 are not built for heavy gaming, but they hold up if expectations stay realistic. It does warm up, especially in hotter environments, but never to the point of being uncomfortable to hold. Back then the battery was decent for a mid-range phone. 5 years later, I was curious if it could actually get me through a normal day without reaching for a charger too soon. At 3885 mAh, 5 years in, I get around 3 to 4 hours of screen on time. It's enough for light use, but it's always in the back of my mind watching the percentage drop, thinking about when to charge next. 18W charging gets it to 80% in about an hour, and full in another half hour. For a used phone, results will vary, but in my case, it's a clear reminder that time has passed. No voice over LTE here. Yeah, there's that. Videos from the main camera reaches 4K at 60 frames per second. and the ultra-wide camera can go up to 4K at 30 fps. The viewfinder looks rough while recording, noise, flat, but once the footage is saved, it's better than I expected. Not great 4K with obvious sharpening and a slightly washed look, but usable. The ultra-wide lens is genuinely wide. The front camera maxes out at 1080p and feels cramped in its field of view, but the actual image, color, balance turns out fine. Video was never Google's strong suit back then, and it shows. Stabilization is there, but the dynamic range feels flat compared to photos. It works fine for quick clips, but it's not something I'd rely for anything more. One small surprise was finding the pan feature here, the same one we get on newer Pixels to get that slow cinematic panning effect without effort. It works just as well here, and it's still one of those little software touches that make the Pixel camera feel distinct. Photos, as before, are still very much Pixel, crisp, balanced, with lighting and contrast that seem to just work. Whether it's a plate of food indoors, a married friend, or a friend who's clearly been dead for centuries standing behind them, the camera handles it the same. Clean images, refined tones. The ultra-wide at 16 megapixels captures day and night scenes with ease. The main sensor does even better. Standard shots look great, and zoom holds together surprisingly well thanks to Google's processing. Daylight scenes, flowers, leaves, small details still have that rich texture, and night scenes continues to impress for stills. But low-light video quickly falls apart with noise. Low-light selfies are also not amazing. They are softer, not the cleanest, but I kind of prefer them over the phones that try to blast the scene with artificial brightness, turning night into day and stripping away the mode. At least here, the atmosphere stays intact. Portrait mode, it's the same story you'd expect from a Pixel. Edge detection just isn't great, and even on the newer models, Google hasn't really solved it. On this older phone, it looks rough. Compared to what the best phones are doing now, it's not something I'd reach for anymore. And if you're shooting video, the limits show too. In warmer weather, extended 4K recordings overheats the phone, and eventually it just stops. So, after a week with the Pixel 4a 5G, it's clear it still works. It's light, comfortable, and the camera reminds me why people loved Pixel in the first place. But the cracks are obvious too. The battery, the frame drops, the missing updates, all the things that remind you it's been 5 years. Well, that's it. My name is Mubashir Hamid. You're watching Honestic, and I'll see you in the next video.